Alright, so sorry about that little short first part, but I guess this is going to be part two, and this is going to be my first ever formal introduction into the second part, into a following part of an episode, I suppose. But I was actually cut off a little bit there. But it's okay, luckily the video is paused. All I was really saying, all I want to wrap up on the finishing thought, was that, so yeah, if you lose some workers, okay, at least for me, when I pull probes, they're usually, probes that I'm pulling off the mineral line to fight, or that's just sort of how it ends up happening. And my point is, if you do, pull probes off gas, or if you do pull probes off the mineral line, chronoing back up some probes and rebuilding your macro as fast as you can is great and all. But if I were to lose just 6 probes out of nowhere off of my mineral line, you do need to pull 2 or 3 probes off your gas to sort of make up for that. And the reason for that is, if you are playing an equally skilled opponent as yourself, basically having having too much gas or too little minerals, it can really throw off the build. And just one example, I guess. I was playing one game where a Banshee killed 5 of my workers on my mineral line, and instead of pulling off probes from the gas, I just try to chrono back up probes and catch back up in the worker count. But I was always having too much gas, too little money throughout the entire game, and I ended up losing the game because of that. So all I'm trying to say, this took me about 10 minutes longer than I wanted to. Just try to keep your balance between gas consumption and mineral consumption equal. And something else I want to mention, this build isn't really so much like gateway on 18 and then next 2 gateways on 80 million or whatever. It's more about, you get this building, you get the nexus, then you get the next couple things. Like, so you open up with the gateway on 13, and then when your warp gate research is at 100 seconds, around there, you add on your next 2 gateways. And then after you started your gas around 640, you get your robo. But if something happens where you have to delay one of these steps in this process, like let's say you get attacked at 5 minutes by some weird barracks rush, marine push, your gas obviously can't still come down at 640. So something that I've sort of, calculated, I mean, it's pretty simple, but I'll sort of give you an example of what I'm about to say right now. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because, alright, if I can find the time in the game, oh my god, I'm sorry, I'm desperately trying to get to like 6:30 in the game. It's not easy with this replay timer. But my point is, okay, I'm just going to go to 6 minutes and then speed up from here. My point is that it's sort of good to have your benchmarks of like, just numbers in your head of where to be at before you start throwing down different tech trees and getting different units and all that good stuff. So we're at 640 in the game. I should be throwing down the gas right about now. We can see my probe count is 28 right now, and I have 3 on gas. I guess I'll just show you when I do indeed get the gas. It should be any second now. And like I said, anywhere around 640 is fine. A little bit earlier means you get a couple extra sentries. A little bit later means you get maybe your gateway tech up faster. Maybe you get a forge a little bit earlier and all that good stuff. So there it goes. You can see I had roughly about 28 probes on the mineral line. Maybe a little bit less than that actually. And then anytime after you start your assimilators, just get your robo when you can. You can see I was doing micro, so that means I could not afford to macro at that time. And while we're back in this replay, I do want to mention, you can see my buildings are like all at the top hemisphere of my base right now. And that was actually intentional, but more so, the reason I put the buildings on this, this location, what you really want to do is have your tech buildings, like your Forge, your Twilight Council, your Robo Bay, all that stuff as far away from dropping lanes. So like a Terran player could easily drop here, or even here, or back to the mineral line. You want to have your tech buildings and your important stuff as far away as possible from those dropping spots. Having gateways around here is actually not a bad thing to do at all, because if he kills a gateway with a drop, that's not bad. That's you know, that's something you can afford to lose. Whereas if he runs in and snipes your robotics bay, or your Twilight Council or something like that, that could be pretty bad. Or your Nexus, that is also pretty bad. Those are the sort of things you don't want to happen. So just keep in mind building placement. Try to put your stuff away from the dropping lanes if possible. And so yeah, the only really other important times are, we will see in this game where I get attacked and I have to pull off workers. So the way to sort of recover from that would be, you know, make sure your balance between minerals and gas consumption is, you know, as similar to what it's supposed to be as possible. And then also, you know, having these sort of battles go down, which actually I don't think we saw this, did we? Yeah, no, we did. Okay, having that sort of stuff happen, I think we did. I'm sorry if I just skipped through an entire fight. Having that sort of stuff happen delays your robo. You know, I should have a robo facility, a second robo facility in a robo bay, either almost finishing building or done building by now. Instead, you can see I haven't started it because I'm too occupied with micro once again, which is actually going quite poorly. But it's just important to know that, you know, just before you add on 2 more gateways, before you add on a forge, get your other tech going first. So anyway, I can't remember. I honestly can't remember if I had shown this or not. But oh well. Sorry if I just skipped some cool fighting. As I said, this is me doing some bad micro, so. But don't think that's an excuse of why I'm skipping it. But something else I want to mention, just a little unit composition tip, is these zealots really the only damage they'll be able to do is when your opponent is sort of like too occupied to micro everything at once. And macro and all that good stuff. So the zealots can easily get kited, obviously, even just by marines, but they can even more so get kited much more easily by concussive shell marauders, which is why I would advise getting sentry stalker, and if you need some beefy units on the front lines, maybe get a zealot, or just pull some probes. But cutting off his units in half and using the sentry stalker is definitely adequate. So with all of that said, another thing I want to mention, if you're still under heavy pressure, especially if you think your opponent's doing a 1 base all-in for some reason, and it's like the 10-minute mark and he hasn't killed you yet, just skip the, you know, delay the Robo Bay if you need to, and get an Immortal out, because Immortals obviously are extremely good against Marauders, and we will see that in a second. I would still advise trying to get those Colossus up when you can, just because they're such good units to have, and they throw your opponent off quite a bit of what you're doing. And so, yeah, we can see that I just kept probing up, kept making workers during this engagement, and I am still way in the lead in the worker count. And this is some very aggressive attacking from our opponent here. But these these Immortals just kill everything he has, so the Marines are not in high enough number. Anyway, so some sort of other stuff to keep in mind. There was a lot of stuff I actually wanted to mention. Oh yeah, okay, so I would actually advise you guys, after you get these 2 Colossus going, which we can see that only 1 is building right now, but oh well, it's good enough, I guess. Normally, before, if this was like a week ago, I would tell you, after you have these 2 Robo building units, add on 2 more gateways. In the last video, in the last episode, I actually mentioned how the upgrades were, you know, your weakest link, basically, in this build. Which you can still overcome, you know, it's still something you have to overcome, and you will do so, basically, by your unit composition. But my point is, adding on a forge and then 2 more gateways is something you can actually afford to do. And when you do that sort of stuff, I would also advise getting your Nexus, because by the time you get your Nexus started, you should have 2 Colossus on the field. And anytime you have 2 Colossus this early in the game, you should feel pretty safe. Just keep in mind that he can always drop you, which is why I'm trying to get these pylons set up. But anyway, so it looks like he's finally going to retreat here. I think he's going to retreat. And then he is getting an earlier 3rd command center than me. And if you're just going to start trying out this build, I don't know if I would advise doing this. Depends how comfortable you are versus Terran in the late game. or it depends how good your macro is and all that stuff. But if you're in like one of the lower leagues, maybe just make this into a 2-base sort of all-in-ish sort of play. Because a lot of times the way this build works, the way PvT ends up playing out, is your opponent tries to take a third base, you go down there, and then you kill it, and then you basically win the game after that. Because what happens is you just deny them ever getting a third base. The reason why you can't attack into their natural and just kill them outright like that is because these ramps and bunkers, when they are established, just become so hard to break through, especially when they have all these workers here that they can easily pull off the mineral line and fight with. And those are actually surprisingly good, especially when you don't have any area of effect units, such as Colossus or Templar. You can see I just intentionally walked into that scan with the Colossus. I know you might think I'm saying that because I'm trying to make myself look better. But I'm being honest when I say that. If he scans over here, and your army's here, and you don't think he saw your Colossus, just be like, whoops, I walked by Colossus into your scan. My bad. The reason you do that, though, let's see if I can pull the production tab here. The reason you do that is because your opponent is going to be making Vikings. That's exactly what you want. And as soon as your opponent sees no Colossus on the field, like let's say you keep these Colossus hidden before the battle actually starts, which means your opponent, maybe he got 2 Vikings just as a precaution, but if he doesn't see any Colossus, then maybe he just doesn't get any at all. Yeah, the Colossus will be great for that first battle. They'll be great for the minute like after the battle. But if they die during that time frame, your opponent's not just gonna stockpile Vikings, But if they see them before the fight even begins, like as we saw here, he scanned my Colossus and he saw them. And by the way, I did make a 3rd Colossus. That was a mistake. But it's not something that's like gonna lose you the game or anything like that. But my point is, we see Vikings on the production tab right now, and the more Vikings he makes, the better. Because yeah, they'll be able to kill these first 2 Colossus pretty easily, especially since, again, you don't want to get range upgrade this early in the game. But since he does overreact with Vikings, or since Terran players most of the time will overreact with Vikings, that is okay. And once again, my bad micro is shining through, ever so bright. But it doesn't matter. Yes, it makes me look like the worst player, but it makes the build look better. And I played against one top 8 master player a couple weeks ago, and it was just like, it's just like a 1A army. You just A move your way through the map, and as long as you have decent force field micro, and as long as you use a guardian shield every now and then, you literally can just brute force your way through a Terran army. And we can see there's only 2 Vikings on the field right now, and he's going to kill my last Colossus any second now, I think. But on the units tab, he's still making Vikings, so I think he'll make a couple more. I'm not sure. This player did do a pretty good job of not overreacting with Vikings, but that's just sort of what you hope for. If you want to keep your Colossus hidden, so you can sort of keep the Viking count as low as possible when you first hit, that's definitely an option. I'm not ruling that out whatsoever. But yeah, getting your 3rd base up as soon as possible is definitely something I would advise doing. Adding on a couple more gateways. Right now you have 5 warp gates and 2 robos. I would advise maybe adding on 2 more gateways and another robo in the near future after you have your 3rd saturated. But I would say do it in that order, because it's better to have more, quicker units that can get on the field, like warp gate units, rather than a 3rd robo sooner. Just because the reinforcement time is much slower with robotics facilities. And we see a drop coming out right now. This is lucky that I saw that with this Stalker. I'm not going to lie. But having pylons placed here, and actually my pylon spreadage this game was not the best. We can see I have 3 over here and 1 over here. But just having them around the map is what you want to do. We can see I'm way oversupplied though, so these pylons, like right over here, should be out in the field rather than in my base. But anyways, that's just one of the tips I want to throw out there.